Well, hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday to you now. Welcome to part 2 of the September newsroom analysis. If you were here yesterday, then you know that we got maybe a quarter of the way through all of the headlines from the month of September, and I decided to just come back and do a part 2 instead of cutting it short or streaming for even longer. Yesterday I was live for like over 2 hours, I think, by the time it was all said and done. So I decided to just do a part 2 today, and I'm happy to have you here with me. If this is your first time here, hi, hello, my name is Beck Griffin. Over the last almost 6 years now, I have been working as an independent citizen journalist because I accidentally stumbled upon some things that were not really being brought to the mainstream in a way that I thought was significant, in a way that I thought reflected the seriousness of what I had learned. And so I decided to be the change that I wanted to see, and 5.5 years later, here I still am, still doing the exact same thing that I started doing all those years ago. And if you are not familiar with my work, you can check out my channel, view my entire catalog, and that'll give you an idea of what I've been doing. But this newsroom analysis is a little bit different from my kind of scripted, organized, deeply researched deep dive episodes. This is a little bit more casual, a little bit more laid back. Basically, I collect news headlines from the previous month that are relevant to the research niche that I am digging into, and I present those at the end of the month, hopefully in a live stream, technological gods permitting, and we discuss and we opine and we speculate and we create an archive and something of a recent historical record of the stuff that's happening, that's having an impact on our world, regardless of whether or not you realize that it's there. I have been learning so much from doing these live streams. I've really been enjoying it. I'm learning more about global events, global governance and politics and society. And the really interesting thing about it all is that when you start to learn more about what's happening in other places outside of your own country, you quickly realize that we're all kind of living through the same experience right now. Regardless of our race or creed, we're all kind of living through a similar experience. And I think that this analysis illustrates that in a really interesting way. And I think that in order to create the world that we want to live in, we need to be connected and a little bit aware. And so taking a look at these recent headlines is my way of trying to encourage that, and hopefully you will take what I discuss and run with it, ask your own questions, do your own research. I do not want to be anyone's one-stop shop for any type of information. That has never been my goal. I am not here to be a subject matter expert. I am learning just like everybody else, but I think we can all learn together and present some information and encourage some productive conversations that I think are really, really important to have. So with all of that said, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Please let me know in the chat where you're listening in from. Let me know how your day is going, how your week has been going so far. And as we get into these articles, I am looking forward to hearing your thoughts and your opinions on the things that we discuss. So I'll go ahead and pull my browser up here. Let's see. Whoops, that's my chat. Hang on just a second. I gotta change my source real quick. Let's see. Here we go. There we go. All right, that's what I want to look at. So this is our first article of the day. This was published on September 11th by Luis Passar. As I always say, I will be doing my best to pronounce all of the proper nouns correctly, all of the terms correctly. I'm sure that I will not nail everything, but I mean no disrespect if I do mispronounce something. This is an initial reading for the most part for me, especially reading it aloud. So you get to see all of the stumbling and the stuttering that usually gets cut out in a regular episode. But we'll go ahead and get into this. Let me translate it. Should have translated when I switched it over. Let's see. Maybe it won't let me switch to reader for some reason. Not all websites are created equal. All right, we'll just have to roll with it, and hopefully InfoBay doesn't have too many ads that pop up. So this is about an individual that I mentioned yesterday, if you were listening in. This is about Juan Luis Cipriani, who has been denounced for sexual abuse. He recently reappeared next to Rafael Lopez Aliaga during an event in Madrid. So we read this yesterday. I want to bring it up and start kind of from here. I'm not going to reread the entire thing, but just to kind of like touch base and have a place to start forward from. We read yesterday that this guy, Cipriani, who the previous pope basically defenestrated and exiled from Peru, has kind of been kicking up his heels a little bit since Pope Francis passed away. I saw something recently. Apparently, Pope Leo had some like private closed door meeting with this guy. What was discussed is anyone's guess. But even though he was told to leave Peru and not return, he's been back at least on one occasion very publicly. He came back to Peru to receive this Medal Order of Merit and the degree of Grand Cross, which was presented to him by Aliaga, who is the mayor of Lima, Peru. And so these names are going to reappear later on in this stream, which is why I wanted to kind of start here. And then we'll switch gears and keep on going. So this is from Regnum Christi, Legionaries of Christ. I have a whole standalone deep dive research into that organization and its downfall if you are curious. But I wanted to present this article because I think it's really interesting. This is from September 16th of last month. The Legionaries of Christ build a holistic approach to safe environments, abuse prevention, responsiveness to victims, and ensuring priest wellness. And if you know anything about the Legionaries of Christ, it's probably that the founder of the organization was just a disgusting predator who preyed on lots and lots of people. He didn't really seem to be too picky. He went after a lot of people, including seminarians in his own seminary, his own school. He had like 2 or 3 mistresses and multiple children with these different people, and all the while he's posturing as a devout Catholic priest who's got this religious organization that is becoming more and more and more popular because they're being able to recruit all of these people, and that's a really big deal for the Vatican because church attendance is down, and what will the church do if there are no more people to give them money? And being a good recruiter for the church was viewed very positively. And so blind eye got turned to a whole lot of shit for a whole long time that shouldn't have. And the jury is still out, I think, on whether or not this organization has authentically, actually reformed. I've heard differing perspectives from people who have had interactions with either the Legionaries of Christ or Regnum Christi within the last 10 years or so. It's kind of interesting, but the entire scandal of it all eventually did blow up, as these things always do. And ever since then, the Legionary of Christ has made a lot of statements expressing a desire to reform, to distance themselves from the legacy of the founder, who is the founder, but not somebody that they're necessarily looking to for, guidance or as an example to follow anymore, blah, blah, blah. And so now they're launching this holistic approach to safe environment, which is obviously about protecting people from predators. And hey, if anybody should be doing this kind of thing, the Legionaries of Christ are probably good ones to do it. So I just wanted to take a gander and see what they're saying about this and kind of what the plan is, because I do think that this is worth paying attention to, because protocols to protect people and ways to assist and provide resources to people after the unthinkable has happened. Those are things that have not been like foregone conclusions or just automatically guaranteed up to now. So we're still kind of in the infancy of developing these kinds of things as a society, and I think we need to pay attention to what is happening and how those steps are being carried out. So I'll read here. It says, when she took on the role of Director of Safe Environment for the Legionaries of Christ 5 years ago, Nikki Hiddle knew that she wanted to help effect real systemic and revolutionary change, not just within the Legionaries of Christ, but within the church as a whole. Guided by this innovative and transformative leadership and shaped by their history, I bet, the Legionaries of Christ are now pioneering a bold new vision for the safe environment. With a master's degree in social work, Nikki brings to the position experience in the fields of social work, education, administration, and child protective services. Using strategic frameworks and tools gleaned from these various sectors, Nikki has been working to develop a strategic approach to the field of safe environment that is both unique and visionary. Nikki is the first layperson. Well, when there's like not much to go by in the way of like pre-existing programs, I think anything that you develop is going to be unique and revolutionary. Let's see. It was certainly, where was I? Nikki's the first layperson and woman to hold this role in the Legions of Christ. My webcam just kicked off for some reason. Give me a second, and I'm gonna see if I can get that back up. There we go. I don't know why it does that sometimes. And my blankie. It's cold here today, y'all. And it's like raining a little bit. So, very cozy vibes over here today. Anyway, it's certainly not an easy role to step into. When applying for the job, Nikki knew very little about the history of Regnum Christi and the Legionaries of Christ and was concerned when she learned of the scandal of its founder. I would think so. As I learned more about their history, I wondered if I really wanted to go down this road of safe environment with the Legionaries of Christ, says Nikki. Probably because she's thinking, I could probably go down with them if this all goes sideways. Nikki was reassured to discover that not only were the leaders with whom she would be working invested and supportive, they were open to embracing her bold approach, which involves true innovation and visionary thought translated into real action. After only 3 months on the job, Nikki's part-time role was developed into a full-time position, which has since grown into a large network of team members, partnerships, and collaborations that encompass a wide variety of areas, including survivor assistance, peer support, canon law, and restorative justice. I mean, that all sounds really great. So when Nikki first began digging into the field of safe environment, what she found was a sector that was very much reactive rather than proactive, spending more resources on responding to scandals and abuse after they had occurred rather than preventing future crises. Yes, that is also something I've noticed. In fact, Nikki noted that many safe environment departments were run by lawyers whose work was focused more on investigations and settlements rather than on preventing the abuse cases from happening in the first place. I saw that most of the work being done was really legalistic in its approach, and I wondered what kind of a difference we could make if, rather than looking through a legal lens and being response and reaction-oriented, we started being more prevention and support-oriented. That's where this new model was born. Drawing from her years of experience in social work and education, Nikki endeavored to bring some of the most effective strategies that she had seen to have some credible impact on those sectors into a field in which they had not yet been applied, the field of safe research, or the field of safe environment. One key concept that Nikki had employed throughout her work in education is response to intervention, RTI, a multi-tiered framework that focuses on early intervention, continual assessment, and a proactive preventative approach to providing support based on each student's level of need. Reminds me of, we had something in the Navy. I can't remember the term now because I've been out of service for almost 6 years now, but there's a term in the Navy for like their risk assessment protocol. Somebody, if you know it in the chat, shout it out. But this response to intervention RTI with the multi-tiered framework that focuses on intervention as continual assessment and proactive preventative approach sounds very like government coded, I guess. Like, it sounds like something that like the government will come up and, hey, I'm not saying that that's like a bad thing necessarily. I'm not even necessarily saying that like in the Navy the risk assessment protocol or whatever that we followed was like a bad thing either. I mean, it was kind of goofy and like everybody kind of made fun of it, but you have to have something, right? You have to have some type of safety guidelines or something to follow anytime you are, you know, doing a job that could be potentially hazardous, or if you are dealing with vulnerable individuals, at-risk individuals, people who are not capable of defending themselves at all times. You need to have something in place to account for that and to protect people, because it's, you just have to assume, right? It's like Murphy's law. What can go wrong will go wrong, and I think that applies across the board, and it applies to situations like this too with child safety, just because of how predatory the people who go after children are. So you need something, and maybe this RTI isn't perfect, but it's a place to start at the very least. And you have nothing, again, the bar is in hell, but it's a place to start. The RTI model builds a strong foundation by putting more effort, energy, and resources into good practices, policies, and clear communication from the very beginning. Nikki knew she could apply the same foundational approach to the field of safe environment in creating a system of intervention built on individualized and personalized priest support. In order to identify those areas in which a priest might be requiring that extra support, Nikki drew on the whole child approach used in the classroom, which counts all aspects of students' lives, including their social, psychological, physical, and emotional development, as integral to their academic progress and success. All of this impacts a student's learning in the classroom, and I realized that we could translate this into the world of safe environment, says Nikki. We started thinking, what does a priest's life look like? What does it entail? And we started looking through the lens of the whole priest and how we can start to find ways of prevention and early intervention and not just respond at a crisis level. That's really interesting. And it'll be interesting to see, I think, in the coming years, if we hear any type of like update on how well this stuff has been working up until now. Because this isn't really about, it doesn't seem the way that it's reading, it's not really about children or vulnerable adults. It's about dealing with the source of the issue, if you will, which is the whole priest. And I think that makes a lot of sense, honestly, even though it's a little bit, it's different for sure. You know, most of the time, intervention, safety protocols, that kind of things, prevention, intervention are usually provided for the victims of like crimes, not the perpetrator. But I think that there is a conversation to be had about the experience of the eventual perpetrator, what their life was like up to that point, and if there is a way for intervention, for something to be implemented, for resources to be provided, whatever, that would perhaps minimize the opportunity for abuses to occur. Now, will it totally eliminate them? No, of course not. No, I don't think that's practical, just because you have to go with the lowest common denominator in this case, which is predatory people, I think, and predatory people are going to do what they need to do to get their prey, and any type of system, protocol, whatever that is implemented will just become something that needs to be worked around, and loopholes will be identified and exploited. You can count on that. So it's interesting. I don't really know what else to say. Let me scroll down through here a little bit. It says the eco map of a legionary priest will consider the relationships that support his work and apostolate, mental and physical health, basic needs like transportation and safe housing, hobbies, social life, and community, including family, friends, and the fellow priests with whom he lives and works, personal growth and formation, and his faith and spirituality. This framework provides a starting point from which to assess each aspect of a legionary's life and to set goals for improvement in areas of struggle or difficulty, improvement which can in turn have a positive impact on all other aspects of his life. So I think that that's really interesting, and I honestly, like, I don't have a huge problem with it, just because I have talked to either men who were at one point in seminary, potentially studying for the priesthood, men who were priests at one time, or men who are still priests. And I have heard from all of these different like groups of people from within this category that, you know, oftentimes priests end up being the villains or the criminals or whatever in the situation. Like they are not the victim, but that doesn't mean that priests are never victims, right? Anyone can be a victim of a crime. It crosses all socioeconomic boundaries. Like, just because you are in a particular position or you enjoy some type of privilege does not necessarily mean that, like, you're protected from all harm. And I think priests can be perceived as exercising a type of privilege, just because of their position and their authority and everything. But in the grand scheme of things, if you actually look at what the day-to-day lives of priests are like, they're not exactly, most of them, not all, because there are clearly, and I know this for a fact, there are priests who are working the system and doing what they need to do to get into wealthy parishes so that they can have the Bentley and the lucrative lifestyle that is possible to have as like a church leader or whatever. But that's not like all priests, and I don't even know if it's fair to say that that's like a majority. That's probably a small percentage of priests who are like able to game the system in that way and use it to their advantage. But at the end of the day, collars and clothing aside, these men are just men, and they have needs too. And my entire perspective of priests and the role that they occupy and what their experiences are probably like was really altered after I read a book that is probably close to 30 years old at this point. It was written back in the 90s by a gentleman named Richard Sipe. Him and another few individuals wrote this book called Sex, Priests, and Secret Codes, the Catholic Church's 2,000-year paper trail of abuse, or sex abuse, one of the two. And you can look it up and find it. And I highly recommend that you do, because the book focuses on some studies that were done, and it looks at some of the statistics and some of the rates for different types of like offenses, and it's really quite complex and quite analytical. And it also delves into Catholic Church history, particularly around the Church's stance on celibacy and on the role of the priesthood and everything. And my perspective of priests changed quite a bit because of that book. And I believe that, you know, priests can be just as vulnerable as anybody else in a system. In this case, we're talking about a religious system, but, you know, in a system that's sort of a top-down authority structure, there is opportunity all the way down for there to be exploitation and abuse. And you know, as tired and annoying as it is, and as much as victim survivors often like rail against the term, it is true that hurt people. It is true, of course. Not everyone who is hurt, not everyone who is a victim of a crime is going to turn around and enact that crime on another person. But we do know there is statistics and data to reflect that a certain percentage of people who are harmed will turn around and harm others. It's the butterfly effect, essentially, playing out in real time. And with the Legionaries of Christ specifically, you get to see that pretty clearly, because the history of the organization, particularly its downfall, is so like publicly recorded. Like you can find articles and books and all kinds of media talking about the downfall of this organization. And Marcial Maciel created a ton of trauma by everything that he did, and that is something that is continuing to have an impact on people's lives, you know, decades after. I mean, the man has been dead now for quite some time, and yet even so, I still see articles about a legionary of Christ priest or something that got caught for child abuse or something like that. And I could not tell you, if I had a nickel for every single time I read in that article that this priest had had some type of relationship with Marcial Maciel or someone who was close to Marcial Maciel, I would be a rich bitch, because it's common. It happens all the time. I see it all the time, and I think that goes to show how that ripple effect of trauma can continue to play out through society, through people who had absolutely no connection to maybe patient zero. It still continues to resonate out, and that is why I thought that this was something that deserved to at least be brought up. It will be interesting to see if we see any other media, if the Legion of Christ or Regnum Christi publishes anything following, if they share any data on how successful this protocol that they're trying to initiate has been. It would be good to have that information. Who knows if that will be something that is like available to the public. But all of this to say, I think that this is a good thing. Even if it's not a perfect system, we have to start somewhere. So I'm not going to continue to read through this article. It's really pretty long and I want to move on. That's basically the crux of it, and you can go and read through this in your own time and all of the other articles that I'm going to be going over in the source document, which is linked down in the description below. So moving right along. All right, here we go. Olan priest investigated for alleged sexual abuse. This was updated September 4th, so we're kind of hopping around a little, but I think it's okay. Why will you not stay translated if I switch you over to reader view? That is really bumming me out. All right. A priest from Olan, identified as Diego Sosa, is being investigated by the prosecutor's office for alleged sexual abuse of adolescents. This is Diego Sosa, a priest from Olan, a rural parish in the coastal province of Santa Elena, is being investigated by the prosecutor's office for alleged sexual abuse of adolescents. The prosecutor's office opened the investigation after a video was posted on social media on August 15th, 2025. It can be seen in the video, it can be seen at least 4 people outside the priest's house where he is standing in the doorway. Next to him is a teenager, and behind him, another young man. What you are saying isn't true, a woman asks. Are you going to deny it too? A man asks. Did he lock me in or not? Did he lock me in or not until I deleted the photo? Another woman asks. A fourth voice can be heard insulting the priest. From the doorway, dressed in a white t-shirt, black patterned shorts, and black socks, Diego Sosa replies, do you want to keep throwing rocks? Throw rocks. I have no problem. Then a woman's voice is heard asking again, what are you doing in your room in boxer shorts? The priest says that in his conscience he hasn't done anything and that the teenagers are coming to his house. They are friends, they are acolytes, they come in peace, everyone is free here. I am not holding anyone here, he explains, as seen in the video. Sosa doesn't answer the question of why there is a minor, according to people, in underwear. The video, with its exchange of accusations and justifications, lasts 1 minute and 12 seconds. On August 17th, 2 days after the video was released, the Attorney General's office announced it had opened an investigation and would request the Specialized Police for Children and Adolescents, DYNAPEN, to submit a preliminary report and gather information related to what happened. On August 18th, Guayaquil priest Cesar Piechestein, known for his conservative stances and active social media presence, published a statement from the Diocese of Santa Elena. The document states that the Ecuadorian Church reaffirms its position of zero tolerance and impunity for any immoral act that may occur. The text states that the Bishop of Santa Elena removed the Olan priest from his pastoral duties while the civil and canonical investigations continue, activating all the protocols that the Church has established to guarantee the care and protection of potential victims. This is what we know about the case. In a press conference broadcast on August 17th by the media outlet Actualidad Informativa and published by other media outlets, Diego Sosa appears seated in front of the altar of the Parish of Jesus of Divine Mercy Catholic Church in Olan with 2 women. At the press conference, Sosa said that the police arrived at his home after a 911 call and found nothing. They questioned the minors, called the parents, questioned me, and the police filed a report, but there was no serious charges for the prosecutor's office, Sosa said. The priest then said he was open to any action taken by the justice system in the church, saying that what they were doing was a complete attack on the church. At the time they were attacking him, a van desecrated the church by breaking down the doors and entering the church. Regarding the minors who were with him, he said 2 are brothers and another young man who commonly accompanied him. It's all false, he said, adding that a woman from the community entered his home and, after knocking on the door, pushed him and yelled at the minors. He then went to the bathroom where he found the boy in his underwear. On August 17th, 2 days after the video of the teenagers at the priest's house circulated, outside protests erupted at the parish house where dozens of neighbors gathered to demand an explanation, according to a report in the newspaper El Universo. They carried signs and asked church and judicial authorities to clarify the complaint. GK discussed the accusations against the priest with 2 Olan residents who wished to remain anonymous. One of them said that one of the mothers of the minors who were at Sosa's home said the priest had given support and guidance to one of the boys because the teenager was on the wrong path. She said the priest rescued him. For this reason, he explains that some parents in the parish have a close and grateful relationship with Sosa. The GK source said Sosa has been in Olan for 5 years without specifying how many. Has been in Olan for a few years without specifying how many. However, he recalled that he previously lived in Manglaroto, another rural parish in the province of Santa Elena, and that some residents there told him that neighbors had also noticed that Sosa had exhibited similar behaviors before referring to his closeness to young people. The leaders of the Olan commune told the GK source that they were unaware of the teenager's relationship with the priest, that they were unaware that they frequented the priest's house, but that some others were aware of this. The other priest GK spoke to said he saw the priest with the young men all the time and even took them on trips to other places with their parents' consent. He also said that it wasn't the first time Sosa had done something similar and that in other communities they no longer wanted to accept him because of such behavior. He liked to go to dances when invited. He says that he would stay up all night dancing, spend time in his car listening to reggaeton at full volume. He also says that people in the town say that when he took kids out to eat, he would make them sit on his lap and kiss them on the face, but since he was a priest, they never imagined he had other intentions. What the hell? Now, they just wait for everything to become clear. I mean, sound off in the chat, but I feel like it's pretty clear. After the video was released on August 15th, the residents of Olan appear to be divided. One of the people GK spoke with said that the vast majority of residents who are closer to the church question the accusations against Sosa. They say they are aware of his treatment of the children and defend his work. On August 18th, at least 10 people protested in front of the church in support of Sosa. Those present carried flags and declared the accusations against him baseless. The person who spoke with GK explained that it's a complex issue since the children, catechists, parents, and others have no accusations against the priest. He also says that he knows that parents have spoken with their children and have not found anything that would make them question the priest's behavior. On the afternoon of August 17th, 2 videos were posted on the Facebook account of the Parish of Jesus of Divine Mercy in Olan, where Diego Sosa was the pastor. One featured mothers and the other featured children, who are also altar boys, speaking in defense of the priest. I don't love that. I don't love having children come out to speak in defense of an adult man accused of abusing children. I don't love that. In the first video, Catherine de Gonzalez, mother of 3 altar boys at the church, yep. And I'm wondering, was it those altar boys' idea? She says she was not there under any pressure from anyone and that she was very hurt because they have not only harmed a human being, but also the entire Christian community. Oh, clutch your pearls, girl. He also said that since the priest came into their lives, he had advised them. I'm sure he did. Another mother featured in the video, Blanca Pesantes, said that her daughter was an altar boy for the priest and is grateful to Sosa for the unconditional support he gave her. Another mother, Juana Corena Gonzalez, said that Father Diego has been a great source of emotional and psychological support for us, a friend who is spontaneous, always cheerful, always willing to help and collaborate in any way he can, and who is there to provide emotional support. Well, of course he is. In another video, the parish's children, in another video lasting just over 17 minutes, the parish's children said the priest has been kind, gentle, loving, and above all respectful. They said he has never disrespected them and has helped them greatly with his advice and teachings. They even said that he has supported them in getting out of the wrong path, although they don't provide details. He's been guiding us for the good, says another minor. The 16 altar boys spoke about how grateful they are to Sosa for the help and support he's given them, stating that he's a respectful man, he's never hurt us or anything, he's always been there as a friend, but not everyone supports it. On the night of August 17th, at least 200 people outside the church demonstrated demanding justice, truth, and the protection of children. They shouted, "Get out," because, according to local media, the priest was still in the church. Some of the signs people carried read, "Abuse has many faces. We embrace the eyes," or "We stand for the children." People demanded that the prosecutor's office thoroughly investigate what happened because it's not normal that teenagers were at Sosa's house after 10 p.m. One of the women who attended the demonstration said they hope what's happening here comes to light. She also said that if the priest is doing what they're denouncing, they should remove him from the scene and stop him from moving from one church to another where he can continue harming children. Police were also present at the demonstration, trying to control the crowd as other people outside the parish were defending Sosa. One of the people GK spoke to says that a priest found on a Friday around 10:30 p.m. with 3 minors in his private quarters, even with their parents' permission, is neither normal nor appropriate. I would agree. He says that if we add to this the testimonies of the people of Olan who say they have also witnessed inappropriate behavior from the priest, alarm bells should have already been ringing. One of GK's sources explains that the authorities must thoroughly investigate what's happening and determine whether he's guilty or innocent, but that in any case, the incident is completely unacceptable for a priest in charge of spiritual care. He also says the case is affecting the community's reputation, dedicated to tourism, its sense of life, and its spirituality. The other GK source explains that since the video was released, there have been many rumors, but since there is no evidence, nothing can be said or done about it. The government's response. Santa Elena government's office said it has asked the competent institutions to investigate the case so that the law can be applied. In an August 16th statement, Viviana Veloz, president of the National Assembly's Commission on Children and Adolescents, said that what happened on the night of August 15th cannot go unnoticed or unpunished. He also wrote that faith cannot be an excuse or a shield for abuse and demanded that the prosecutor's office act immediately. Oh, and I guess this is one of the videos right here. That day, the commission included the case of the Olan priest in the oversight process that the assembly members initiated on July 25th on the cases of institutional and clerical sexual violence in Ecuador. According to the assembly members, they have requested data from the church and other institutions, but have not yet received it. For August 20th, 2025, the Commission on Children and Adolescents, chaired by Veloz, summoned Wilson Toyanga, Attorney General of the state, Harold Burbano, Minister of Economic and Social Inclusion, Cesar Cordova, Ombudsman of Ecuador, and Sarah Oviedo of the Coalition to Combat Sexual Violence in Spaces of Faith. As part of the investigation into sexual violence in the Catholic Church against minors, they spoke about the Olan case. That day, Wilson Toyanga did not appear and sent Jorge Baños to represent the prosecutor's office. Baños said that priest Diego Sosa was notified as a suspect and that protective measures were ordered, including psychological evaluations for the victims and other expert reports, while Burbano did not appear. Cesar Cordova excused himself and sent Rodrigo Varela and Lorena Chavez to replace him. Varela said they instructed the provincial delegation of Santa Elena to oversee due process from the authorities of the Diocese of Mangloralto, where Sosa was a priest, and that they requested access to his file. Chavez said that other actions implemented included the creation of specific working groups with the Episcopal Conference and the review of protocols for working with children and adolescents. In the middle of the session, Viviana Veloz received a video. In that video, according to the assemblywoman, one of the teenagers who had allegedly been in the priest's house can be seen speaking in defense of Sosa. Yikes. Sarah Oviedo, of the Coalition to Combat Sexual Violence in Faith-Based Spaces, told legislators that Sosa was also a priest at a parish in San Miguel del Común in Ayacucho in northern Quito, and that they removed him from there because they were going to lynch him. She doesn't know why, nor did she specify when he was there. But then he was transferred to Mangloralto, where he was also removed. Oviedo said that this is a modus operandi of the church to transfer them from parish to parish. Sure is. He also said that despite the fact that the Bishop of Santa Elena removed him from his pastoral duties, Diego Sosa remains in Olan asking people to support him, and that they are threatening the people who denounced him. On September 4th, there was Children's Commission, another session of the Assembly, this time chaired by Raul Chavez, president of the Reto movement, which allied itself with the Citizen Revolution in the 2025 elections. The session was attended by Andres Carrascosa, Apostolic Nuncio to Ecuador, Luis Cabrera, Archbishop of Guayaquil, Alfredo Espinosa, Archbishop of Quito, Eduardo Castillo, Archbishop of Puerto Viejo, Ivan Minda, Bishop of Santa Elena, and Christian Paula of Transitional Justice, but none of them attended. Those who did appear were Virginia Gomez from the okay, so there were some people that showed up. I don't think I can keep reading these names. That spoke in defense the need to strengthen sex education in public schools and colleges. They spoke about cases of violence against minors and the need for a child-focused manual because of the lack of one aggravates the situation. Again, here's another example where there's no pre-existing protocols in place. So following interventions by Gomez and Pardo, the commission was scheduled to receive Father Rodrigo Fausto Crespo, Gabriel Pereira, and some other people. However, those appearances were declared confidential. So I feel like in this story you can really see like the Boston Globe spotlight of it all, you know, the shuffling and the moving around and the going from place to place. And then of course there's people who are going to leap to carry water for this man because, as the article discussed, he's presented himself as an indispensable aid and support to families who need it. I think it's interesting that it was a mother who was there with her sons, who are altar servers, who was speaking in defense of Sosa, and it doesn't say anything about her husband, which makes me wonder if she's a single mother, which would add another layer to this entire thing and would again mean that she's kind of in a vulnerable position where somebody who appears to be kind and charismatic and good with children will really be able to ingratiate and endear themselves to somebody in that situation. That's what crosses my mind. So anyway, there's that. Wanted to read about it. I wish I could say that this is the last priest sex abuse article that we're going to be reading, but it is not. I'll go ahead and take a look at the chat real quick before I move on. Hi, Ohms. It's good to see you. And you're in Virginia. Okay, good to know. I spent a decent amount of time in Virginia at one point in my life. During my military days, I went to a training school at Little Creek in like the Virginia Beach area, Little Creek Naval Station. And then my husband was stationed in Yorktown at one point when I was stationed in Connecticut, and so we would go back and forth quite often to see each other in the early days of our relationship. So I am pretty familiar with like the Chesapeake Bay and Hampton area, especially. Hopefully you don't live in that area. It's very congested and I would not wish that on you. Mike said, would a follower of Christ really unquestionably approve of the term legion or legionary? I don't know. I think it's supposed to be like a throwback or something, like an homage to like the Roman legionary soldier or something like that. And it's the whole idea of being like a soldier of Christ. But like, I don't know why you wouldn't just call yourself soldier of Christ then in that case, instead of Legion of Christ. The whole like legion of it all does kind of have like a sort of sinister overtone to it. Yes, and I agree that the entire thing is sketchy and very, very clear. As far as Sosa is concerned, who knows? We'll see if I see any other headlines about that in the coming months. But that just goes to show, for all the statements that are being made and the protocols that are being launched and the efforts of what I am sure are good people trying to do good things, the original problems that kind of have launched the Catholic Church into infamy, particularly in regard to abuses, it's not really changed a whole lot, especially in these kind of like out of the way places that maybe aren't in the spotlight or like in the mainstream quite as much. These rural places, I feel like this kind of thing is able to flourish there so much more easily. All right, I'm gonna keep going here. So this is our next article, and this is about a school, the Truro School. So this was published on the 16th of September. The City Council of Constanti approves a special urban plan to expand the Truro School. The project in the initial phase includes the land of the road from Reus to Constanti and the Polygon 20, whatever that means. So the City Council of Constanti has approved the initial phase of a special urban plan that will affect the land where the Truro School is located, which proposes an expansion of its facilities. The project, in an initial phase approved last August, proposes an urban modification on the Reus Road to Constanti and on the land of Polygon 20, including plots 11, 12, 13, 26, and 96 of the municipality of Constanti, according to the edict published by the consistory. The institution proposes an initial phase of construction for the school located in Constanti, although the new functions have not been specified within the project. In this case, a normal urban plan has not been presented, but a special plan that provides for a construction based on the creation of infrastructures that can affect public elements in certain spaces. The Truro de Constanti School is part of the historic Tarragona institution created by families animated by the creator of Opus Dei, Jose Maria Escriva. Together with the Ora School, it is one of the largest school entities in Tarragona, from kindergarten to university, and between the two institutions, it welcomes more than 1,200 students. El Truro specifically was founded in 1970 with the intention of welcoming male students, and a year later, the entity Ara was created, located in La Cananja, although it is located within the municipality of Reus for the females. Since its creation 50 years ago, the two entities offer a segregated education by sex and based on their Christian values. Although the education of the center during all educational levels has always been segregated, since 2022, secondary education became mixed. And as I recall, and this is, I think, Diari Mes, this is a Spanish Catalan news thing, and I remember seeing something, it was either earlier this year or late last year, that was saying that in order for like private schools in Spain to continue receiving federal funding, they were going to have to do away with the whole like segregated by gender thing, and there were some other changes that were going to be made that would have really cramped Opus Dei's educational model and style. And there were some back and forth, and one of the schools I remember reading, maybe this was in Latin America somewhere, was like doing everything it could to figure out how to bring in more funding so that they wouldn't have to capitulate and, you know, mix the genders, because heaven forbid that boys and girls actually like grow up together and learn how to like communicate and work together. We can't have that. And so I do know that there was like quite a bit of turmoil and strife over that. It says the primary for the moment is maintained with this model of separation, although the professional concert signed with the administration will end this academic year 2025-26 following the provisions of the current educational law, which establishes the withdrawal of segregation by sex to all subsidized centers. The Tarragona institution belongs to the entity Institutio Familiar de Educatio, an educational group that currently has 13 schools in Catalonia and the Balearic Islands. They have more than 8,000 students and 700 education professionals and have been operating since 1969 with a great impact on Tarragona. So I wanted to just bring up this Tarragona institution, this Truro School, the Opus Dei of it all, particularly since, you know, they are reaching thousands of young people and are employing hundreds of educational professionals. Given Opus Dei's like stated mission to re-Christianize the world and carry out this very specific mission from its founder, Jose Maria Escriva. I always pay attention to stuff like this. The education of it all, I think, is perhaps more critical than people realize, especially now as Opus Dei is, I believe, pivoting to put more money and effort into education and like outreach through media and entertainment, because they're being forced to, because the organization's not really keeping up its like membership. The traditional ways of like recruiting people are not as successful as they once were, and this is something that you can read. Former members have been talking about this phenomenon for a number of years. You can read about it on Opus Libris, the Spanish site for former members of Opus Dei. You can read about it on Opus Dei Exposed, which is the English site for former members, and I even believe there's some stuff about it on ODAN as well, the Opus Dei Awareness Network. For sure, there are stories on the Opus Dei Awareness Network from parents who have had children who were going to Opus Dei schools in the United States in this case, and what they were reporting, the experiences that they were reporting that their children were having, and the environment that was inculcated within these schools was very, very concerning. And I have no doubt that it's probably much the same everywhere else, just because Opus Dei has a playbook that they follow, a kind of a modus operandi that they adhere to. And so when something is, you can just assume, I think, pretty safely that if something is one way, one place, there's going to be a sort of homogenization across the board, if you will. Oh, interesting. This page is no longer available. No, there it is. All right. So yesterday, during the stream, I touched on Spain's very violent, traumatic history, and the trauma that is still felt in the lives of Spanish citizens, just from the country's history and everything. And I want to read this article here. This was published on September 17th, and the headline says, "One of the survivors of the Women's Board in Solidarities. They were like a Spanish Gestapo for women. Consuelo Garcia del Cid was internal in this Francoist institution where girls who did not fit in with the regime's morals were locked up." So this is real. This happened during Spain's fascist background and history following Franco's regime. So Consuelo was 16 years old when she was transferred to a reformatory in Madrid. The crime? Changing her dress code and protesting against the established order. One morning, my mother came into my room with an Opus Dei doctor. Look at that. Look who's making an appearance, an Opus Dei doctor. If you've missed it, I've written extensively on my Substack about what I view as abuse of psychiatric medicine within Opus Dei. I also have a couple of deep dive episodes digging into it. This is such a big deal, and perhaps one of the greatest human rights abuses alleged to be happening in Opus Dei, in my opinion. And here in this story, we see an Opus Dei doctor coming in, because these doctors are oftentimes, it seems to me, used less as a way to actually provide assistance and help to people who need it, and more as a way to control the individual. It's another layer of control, which, in cults, they're all about the control. So this Opus Dei doctor told Consuelo that they were going to give her a flu shot. She says, "I don't remember anything else. I woke up in a room I didn't know. I cried a lot." The Patronato de Protección a la Mujer was a Francoist institution of repression where they interned young adolescents between 16 and 25 years old who, in the eyes of the regime, did not fit the model of femininity of the time. Born in Spain in 1941, it had internment centers run by religious orders that worked on the re-education of the inmates. Consuelo, one of them, speaks harshly about it in the program Solidarities with Merce Fulch. There are no embellishments in what she says. She pours out all of her experience without concessions. Quote, "You felt the weight of Francoism." The existence of this system of control over girls during Francoism is almost unknown to most of the population, and this adds another layer of pain to its survivors. Consuelo, a survivor of the Patronato de Protección a la Mujer, describes the institution in these terms. It was a Spanish Gestapo for women. The internment centers, supervised by religious congregations such as the Adorers, the Oblates, or the Trinitarians, were scattered throughout Spain, and the nuns deployed a machinery of violence, guilt, and terror. The Women's Protection Board did not end with Franco's death, but continued to function well into the 1980s. So, some of you were born, and this was still going on. Consuelo has spent more than a decade researching these reformatories with the aim of fighting against the oblivion that the survivors experienced with the arrival of democracy. The path now is one of recognition and reparation. Ooh, I think I might want to do a deep dive on this. The victims want a political gesture which includes an ex officio investigation into serious human rights violations, which has not yet arrived. In Catalonia, at the request of Esquerra, the Commons, and the CUP, the creation of a commission has been requested to investigate the abuse and mistreatment of thousands of women who spent their youth in the reformatories of the Patronato. And they're still suffering and dealing with the trauma today. And people today don't even know. Along with, I also want to do a deep dive into the Magdalene laundries at some point, which was something that happened in Ireland. And there is a film that is going to be released. I think it has, I saw in the trailer that Matt Damon was in it. So I'm not sure when that will be coming out, but I did see that, and there's been more news headlines and things because if you don't know about the Magdalene laundries, basically Ireland, I don't know if it was in concert with the government or if it was purely a religious thing, but basically these homes were set up and run by a religious order of nuns that were supposed to be homes for unwed single mothers who were pregnant. They could come and work there and ostensibly learn some skills, and then they would have their baby. It was basically like a place to send these women because the Irish society at the time didn't want them in plain view because they viewed it as such a shameful thing, having a child out of wedlock. And so these girls were sent to these places, these laundries, and what ended up happening was that, you know, they were abused, they were neglected, they were mistreated, they were exposed to inhumane conditions, they were deprived of their children were ripped from their arms and given away to families around the world. And there are women and now adult children of this whole tragic situation who are still searching for their parent or their child, and they still have not found them. But what was found was a gigantic mass grave at the site of, I don't know if there was more than one laundry or if there was like just the one primary laundry, but at this one former site, they discovered a gigantic mass grave of human, like, child and infant remains. And basically, the children would die, and because they weren't receiving adequate care in these laundries, and rather than giving them a proper burial, they were just chucked into a cistern. And then eventually that cistern was covered up, and then a playground was built over top of it, and now children can go there and play, or at least they were up until a point, up until the site was rediscovered. And I don't remember exactly how that happened, but the site was rediscovered, and they've been excavating the grave, and that entire situation has kind of like forced the Irish people to deal with the fact that this Magdalene laundry thing is a part of their history, and to deal with the trauma and everything that it generated. It's kind of another example of abuse being perpetuated by, in this case, a government with religious support, and then in Ireland's case, maybe it was a religion with government support. I don't exactly know the minutia of it all, but very, very similar situations. And I want to do a deep dive talking about Magdalene laundries at some point, and this would be another really good one, I think, because people don't realize that this stuff was happening up into our recent present day. It was the same thing with the Magdalene laundries. They didn't get officially closed until like the 70s or something, 70s or 80s. Again, some of you here were born when these places were still in operation. And the trauma and the harm that they have caused is just incalculable. And I think more people need to know these histories and need to know what has been done to people who society or religion or the government has deemed as like undesirable. It's not just something that happened during, World War II. It's not just something that a madman like Hitler did. There have been lots and lots of mad people, and the harm that they have done is significant. So, moving right along, let's look at opusdei.org. Every once in a while, I will present one of the articles from their own site. They're always kind of interesting to look at, and it's a good way sometimes to just like see what the organization is up to and what they're kind of planning on doing next. You can kind of put your finger to the pulse a bit. And this article here was published on the 16th, and the title says, "The World Map of Translation and the Universal Projection of Camino." This map visually collects the places of the 5 continents in which the work of St. Josemaria has been translated. The Instituto Cervantes presented in Cadiz during the International Congress of the Spanish Language an unprecedented tool, the World Map of Translation. This project opens a unique window to contemplate how works originally written in Spanish have been moved to other languages over the years. Each title is registered with its translations, its editions, and the evolution of its international reception. With this data, the Center for Studies Josemaria Escrivá has edited a map with all the translations of Camino by countries and the number of editions that each of them has published. When walking this map, a unique title stands out: Camino, the classic of spirituality of Josemaria, St. Josemaria. With 142 translations recorded, it is only surpassed by Don Quixote de la Mancha, 100 Years of Solitude, and Love in Times of Cholera. The map itself allows to identify moments of special expansion of the work of the founder of Opus Dei. In the years of the Second Vatican Council, the editions multiplied, reflecting the spiritual vitality of the moment. And it was the same in 1992 with his beatification, and in 2002 when he was canonized and the centenary of his birth was celebrated. Each of these milestones resulted in a renewed interest in bringing the book's message to new cultures and languages. Recently, during his Lenten Challenge, the Hallow Catholic prayer application used Camino to guide the meditations of this liturgical time. This resulted in the book being among Amazon's best-selling for several weeks. So I think that this is interesting. Opus Dei has been accused by former members and journalists of engaging in revisionist history, particularly in regard to the founder, Josemaria Escrivá, and kind of whitewashing the historical facts a little bit to make them just cleaner and more appealing and less problematic overall. And this is like the editorializing the creative liberties in new technological form. Now they have this interactive map where, look, you can click and see where all of Opus Dei's literature has gone. And let's see, let's click on this one's in Canada. Oh, look, yep. There you go. One, what did it say? 2 editions. And North America, Estados Unidos, The Way, 17. So, like, it's another interesting way to see how they are kind of tracking things. And this is kind of a new thing, too, I think. This is the first time that I've ever seen Opus Dei utilize something like this, like an interactive map with like information on it. If there are former members in the chat who are inclined to sound off, or if you want to pipe up if you know any kind of fun facts about this kind of thing, I think it's interesting that they're using tech to present something like this. And yeah, obviously it's to get this information out to a wider audience, right? I mean, here they mentioned that the Hallow Catholic Prayer app, which we talked about yesterday, used Camino, and that resulted in the book jumping up in the Amazon's bestseller list. So it's a successful venture for them. All right, moving right along. It says Quimera Carina also diverted seizures from customs for libertarians and obscurantists. So this is an interesting article that ties into something that I kind of became aware of back in 2024. I'll get into this article before I get into what I'm referring to. This was published September 18th, just so we can all kind of get on the same page. It says, through an investigation carried out by the journalist Alejandro Rebasio, it came to light that Carina Millet, in addition to being a comic book, was dedicated to distributing the confiscations of customs among her friends. The main recipients of the seized property were the foundations linked to the clergy or militants of La Libertad Avanza. In contrast, the government left the popular canteens supported by the picketing organizations without food, with the aim of dismantling this movement of struggle. Make this screen just a little bit bigger so all the text fits in it. Why are you like this? Why are you the way that you are? Can I switch it to reading, or will it translate it back? There we go. From the beginning of the libertarian movement management, the Secretariat of the Presidency by Carina Millet and his second, Eduardo Lul Menem, delivered items confiscated from the customs to 104 entities, of which 61 were NGOs. The majority belongs to some religious institution, such as the Conan del Opus Dei Foundation, chaired by Abel Albino, in which the Ministry of Human Capital delegated the task of delivering part of the food held in the state deposits instead of distributing them in the canteens that put the neighborhood organizations themselves on their feet. In addition to this prerogative, Conan, which is the Opus Dei organization, received 7 shipments with donations from customs that were since he took over Millet. It is a deeply obscurantist foundation which even humiliates and extorts women in vulnerable situations who turn to it for food assistance for their children. The government filled it with resources because it serves as an instrument to discipline society and pass its plan adjustment. For the same reason, it punishes the Picatero movement, through which the struggle of the most postponed sectors is expressed. The evangelical churches were also recipients of the generosity of Carina Millet, who assigned several foreign mint freight. Among them, the Portal del Norte Foundation by Pastor Jorge Ledesma, who built the mega employ in Chaco, to which Javier Millet attended for the inauguration. The religious transcended media after having tried to justify the financing of the building by invoking a supposed miracle that would have converted 100,000 pesos into $100,000, surpassing the biblical feat of water transformed into wine. It seems that the lack of transparency is a requirement to receive the gifts of the Secretariat of the Presidency. They also arrived at the Los Sueños se Cumplen Foundation, denounced for being left with the funds of neighbors who aspired to their own house, to the Raymar Argentina Civil Foundation in the province of Buenos Aires, on which they weigh causes for ill treatment and slave labor of young people interned for problematic consumption, and to the Civil Association Federation of Box of Rio Negro, recently intervened. Like the shipments addressed to the Dario Del Nallo Foundation, who was prosecuted in the emblematic smuggling cause that took place under the government of Christina Kirchner, known as the Customs Mafia, In addition to having that record, the Civil Association has registered the web domain of the School of Training, Debate, and Political Analysis, EFDAP, which responds to the political point guard of La Libertad Avenza, Sebastian Perea. As we can see, the spoils of customs embargoes are distributed among the members of the ruling party. Such is the case that after receiving NGOs were the Manos Abiertas Foundation, chaired by a relative of the Libertarian deputy Facundo Correal Llano, and the Gia Madre Tierra Mitologia Greek Foundation, the wife and sister of the ruling deputy Lissandro Almiron. He also got his own, about 3,444 basic necessities, white clothing, jackets, shoes, stockings, and bazaar items, and 30 cell phones to the Institute of Strategic Studies and Civil Association Security, which he founded and directed until 2023. The hypocrisy of the government could not be greater. While distributing merchandise among the most corrupt foundations in the country, beneficiating their environment, he accused ghost popular canteens as a pretext to defuse them, appealing to alleged audits that he later admitted were never carried forward, and of embezzlement of funds to the Picatera organizations such as the Workers' Poll, mounting a cause. The adjusters and coimers who govern us played to dirty those who fight tirelessly against hunger and poverty in the slums, when they are the ones who take advantage of their position of power to arm all kinds of cures at the expense of the state. And this didn't translate down here for some reason. Let's see. Gosh, that's annoying. The internet, man. All right. Pull this back out so I can read the last of this article, since it doesn't want to translate the rest of it. Let's see, where was I? Hypocrisy of the government. The Zionist institutions did not stay outside the delivery, so we're bringing Israel into this. 3 remittances were assigned to the Skolam Alaham Israelite Cultural Association from Corrientes, and another to the Memory of the Holocaust Foundation of Buenos Aires, chaired by the businessman Marcello Mindlin. As we can see, Millet's support for genocidal Zionism is also material. The numerous shipments of confiscations to very questioned public bodies, such as the Rioa headquarters of the PAMI, from where the Menem family comes from, and the ANSES of Santiago del Estero, where the scandal of the Mileist Noki was unleashed, which, in exchange for a position in the unit, had to contribute 25% of the salary to the La Libertad Avenza. It may be asked, taking into account her background, what return Corinna Millet receives for this discretionary distribution, which will also charge will it also charge 3% for her work of Baguillera? However, it was clear that the government was on the banner with the emblem of anti-corruption and reproducing the worst methods of the political caste and the protagonists of the traditional parties. The people have to rise to get rid of this band of unrepresentables. So this situation with funds not being distributed, or resources not being distributed to communities that needed them, has been an ongoing thing. And this Opus Dei Conan Foundation has been implicated in this entire situation before. This is not a new situation at all. And if you're interested in reading any more about it, like I said, you can find my articles linked in the source document down below. But then you can also just do some quick Googling, and there's some interesting stuff about this Conan Foundation and the Millet family as well, and their involvement in politics. So this is from Lithuania. This was published on the 19th of September. The battle for the Ministry of Energy. Who will become the new successor? So, Ministry of Energy, Naseda veto, Samagitian accusations, and return to the stage of the old characters. The birth of a new government is currently taking place in Lithuania as a long series with constant intrigue. Only President Gitanas Nausėda has stopped filming for a short time again, this time because of the Ministry of Energy, whose chair looks more expensive than gold reserves. Why? Because it is this ministry, according to His Excellency, that is the heart of national security. Or maybe it is just too interesting to be left to Sam Agashian and his During the Dawn of the Nimunas. So the Samagachia person, of course, did not miss the opportunity to cause a buzz on Facebook for this purpose. He stated with a bang that a real fight was taking place between the Energy clan and the Lithuanian state. And he added some spice. He mentioned Opus Dei, a religious organization that is usually talked about quietly, like Voldemort. According to him, this mystical group has been dragging strings in the ministries of energy and transport for the second decade, and the mysterious ones belonging to it allegedly occupy strategic positions. Throughout this time, the same characters have rotated on the Lithuanian energy stage. Rokas Masilius, who moved from the Minister of Energy to the sphere of transport and is now sitting at the top of Litgrid. Danius Krivis, who is already out of the stage but still remembers the time when he himself was the boss of the ministry. And, of course, this gentleman here, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name because I will definitely butcher it, but he's a universal soldier who changed the political flags faster than some. Something of a fence-sitter flip-flopper, if you will. And here the law firm TGS Baltic, now beautifully renamed Tagos, like a mysterious actor from a detective film, still appears in time and place whenever you need to sign a new profitable contract. Within a few years, this firm earned solid sums from state orders, and the bills, as in the whole profitable business, are paid by none other than anyone, but by those who use the service the least or do not use it at all, in this case, taxpayers. Court marathons are a separate season of this political series. Gazprom case, it ended that Lithuania spent more than 10 million euros on its lawyers and still had to pay for the work of Gazprom's lawyers. It is already a classic art of defeat. The Veolia case, Lithuania received 35 million euros, but almost half of them were immediately given to lawyers. The state was left with crumbs, and the faces of the lawyers were decorated with a wide smile. The president's office now views the Ministry of Energy as the Holy Grail. It will not allow anything into it. But the Pandora's Ark is not yet finally open because the unanswered questions remain. For example, did the Social Democrats really want to give the ministry to Žemaitaitis, or did he just want him to shout out loud what they themselves did not dare to say? While they're all fighting for the post, ordinary residents only have to prepare for another season titled Who Will Manage Our Electricity and Money? In the meantime, what does Samagochian have is nothing to erase. For example, a huge ego leading only forward, the politician openly stated that he is determined to hold the front, proposes the same candidates for energy and environment ministers, even though the president has already rejected them. The party is of the opinion that there is no need to change names, as if it were a matter of principle. Prime Minister Inga Rugiene takes a more cautious stance. She does not want to drag the same candidates to the presidential palace again, and the leader of the Social Democrats, Mindaugas Sinkevičius, is openly worried that time is melting away. The government's program is due to be approved at the end of September, but two ministries are still without permanent leaders. At that time, Žemaitaitis is heating the atmosphere even more. He mentions the interpellation of the Minister of National Defense, D for Shakalin, although the ruling parties see it as a political trick, not a serious threat. Meanwhile, another individual has been recently frequently mentioned in the context of political scandal, and he may become a new candidate for the post of the Ministry of Energy, but his family business ties raise questions about transparency. The STT and the Anti-Corruption Commission of the Seimas are investigating the energy projections of the Skardizias family in Lithuania and abroad. His wife lent 100,000 euros to the Belarusian company Investenergoy, which sells electricity at extremely high rates, and Gazprom Bank provided funding to it. In Lithuania, the family receives income from the lease of wind power plants in Silute district, and older transactions with Russian capital investments raise questions about possible conflicts of interest and benefiting to the politicians' decisions. Despite public questions about financial relations and possible influence, during the dawn of the Nimanis group states that Skardizias is competent and experienced in the field of energy, meets all requirements, and does not have past suspicious stories. The leader of the group assesses his experience as a decisive factor in ensuring control of the group and the sector, especially after the president's rejections to previous candidates. So, corruption, power, money grubbing politicians. In many, many ways, what's happening in Lithuania does not really seem so different from what is happening here in the United States. All right, moving right along. We're making some good headway. I still don't know, though, if I'm going to get to all of the articles from September today. I have been going for an hour and a half now, and I am still not even halfway through. So we're gonna do our best. All right, so here is another article about an abuse case. I told you there was going to be more than one. And the headline for this article, which was written September 19th, says the priest accused of sexual abuse receives a promotion and is elected to the top of his order. So the hearing of the criminal trial against a young priest of the Titini has just been held. The alleged victim is a 20-year-old, they say boy, but I think it would be more correct to say young man. In Italy, there are more than 1,200 abusive priests. Whoa. But there is a huge submerged between cover-ups and no criminal or canonical consequences. We have collected numbers and testimonies. The priest has several perversions. He was asking me to sleep in the doghouse with his wing, we were told, in another affair. The pandemic, the forced isolation, the interrupted studies, and the difficulty in accepting one's sexuality in an unwelcoming family context. At one point, Mirko thought his homosexuality was a disease and he wanted to heal. So once again, highlighting an LGBTQI story. There was another one that I read yesterday that was really, really sad. And I try to highlight these whenever I see them, because just because they are rare does not mean that they don't happen. And I want to represent that. So Mirko is the fancy name, or I'm assuming they mean the assumed identity alias of a 22-year-old who is deciding to cling to the church. Disappointed by the modern tradition, he began to participate in the masses that followed the ancient rite in Latin in a basilica in the historic center of a southern city. Behind the altar is Father A, almost 40 years old, belonging to the order of the Titini. From November 2022 until Christmas, Mirko is in church every Sunday. He doesn't know what's waiting for him yet. It all starts with an invitation to participate in the Mass, then the invitations to dinners with the community arrive, and in the end, the proposal to remain indefinitely in the convent of Naples, day and night. At the time, Mirko is fragile, afraid of everything, and is torn apart by guilt. Yeah, because remember, he's like searching for reasons because he's thinking of his orientation, his sexual orientation, as a disease that he needs to try to heal. It says that the Titini became his family, but it is precisely within the walls of the monastery that he suffers physical and psychological abuse. With a consensus that, as Mirko claims, was often extorted from him and depended on his condition of submission, Mirko, who had never had relationships before, struggled to figure out what was right and wrong. After several months, he goes into crises and comes to think of suicide. It will take time to confide in his psychologist and report. With yesterday's hearing before the court in Naples, the trial phase of the first-degree criminal proceedings against A begin. The allegations are of sexual assault sexual assault and abuse of the victim's weaknesses. It's not an isolated case. The Association of Survivors of Clergy Sexual Abuse has counted from the 2000s to today 1,236 cases of abuse and 840 covered-up situations. They are not exhaustive data, but in Italy, there is no official monitoring. In some regions, such as Lombardy, and particularly Milan, the submerged far exceeds the number of final convictions. Often the proceedings that take place before the regional ecclesiastical courts do not lead to convictions, and in the meantime, the accused priests are promoted or transferred. That's what happened to Father A. Pending the conclusion of the investigation, the top management of the order decided to move him to another location in northern Italy, where he continued to celebrate the Eucharist, Mass, and penance, with the obligation to adopt particular caution with young people and children. My dog. In the new location, he was allowed to continue religious studies and online classes with novices. In July 2025, a kind of promotion would come. The provincial government of the Order of the Regular Clerics Titini d'Italia elected Father A among the figures at the top of the 3-year period 2025 to 28. The Order of Thetans, interesting. I wonder how that's actually the Order of Thetans. I've never heard of that. But I just watched a YouTube video about South Park's Scientology episode, and Thetans are, which I think it's spelled a little different, but Thetans are like a Scientology thing that you have to like contend with. Anyway, so this Order of Thetans, or whatever, was founded in 1524, immediately after the Protestant Reform. Among the founding values is the attempt to live like the apostles and the renunciation of goods and rents, devoting themselves only to God's charity and mercy. Father A arrived in Italy from Poland and began exercising in a parish in the center. Graduated in liturgy, he continued his postgraduate studies. With a deep admiration for Benedict XVI, he was ordained a priest by one of the archbishops closest to Ratzinger. He would also receive his zucchetto as a gift, a unique privilege. Father A is the first person Mirko meets during the Mass celebrations, while reckoning with his insecurities and the need for approval. During the 8 months of initiation into religious life, Father A is the reference for all young novices. The relationship is based on an alternation between reassurance and humiliation. A seems aware of the power he exercises over the boy. Mirko is almost plagiarized by this figure, often idealized. After a few months, appointments arrive in the priest's room where Mirko claims sexual abuse took place. In November 2022, the boy decides to leave the community, begins a journey with a psychologist, and finds the courage to denounce. The trial and the process of debate has been going on since the autumn of 2024. On September 17th, the last hearing, among the allegations are sexual violence, abusing the boy's fragile conditions, and the psychological abuse that occurred during the training period. Lawyer Massimo Callo, a defender of the victim who formed a civil part, told Milano Today. Father A and his lawyer, joined by Milano Today dossier, do not make any statements about it being an ongoing trial, but will presumably continue to argue that there was consent from the victim. It's still an open story, and there are so many things that don't match. Father Adam Merrick, the new head of the province of Titini, currently rector of the Church of San Giuseppe dei Titini in Palermo, told Milano Today, who claims not to know the story in detail, having taken over at a later date. In the theater community, Father A has always been indicated for his honesty, his integrity, and his righteousness as a person above suspicion. We do not understand the reasons that drove the self-styled victim to the criminal complaint. At the state, given the slope of a criminal judgment, we consider it appropriate not to issue any particular statement. The trials are carried out in the courtrooms, not in the public squares or in the newspapers, leaving the public opinion the task of judging the defendants, replies the Order of the Titini to Milano Today. I understand what Mirko feels. Giorgio Babix, a dossier, so they're quoting this person. The translation's a little funky here, so I'm having to paraphrase. They quoted this person who said they understand how Mirko feels, who had to run away to Milan to rebuild a life for himself after the sexual harassment of a priest who had been his father. I think they're saying that this is this Giorgio person. Fled Milan. His story begins in Lublin in Poland, and a family he defines as dysfunctional, a non-effective mother, alcoholic father, and violence. His frailties were similar to Mirko's. Again, the church becomes a reference, and when the Italian priest who is attending his family in Poland offers him the opportunity to reach him in Italy, it doesn't take long to accept. I was 13 years old, and I lived in the canonical house of a small town. I didn't speak Italian yet, and I didn't understand what was going on, he recalls. The priest was a pedophile and had several perversions. He asked me to sleep in the kennel with his wing. I don't know what that means. I think that's a mistranslation. I don't know what that means, with his wing. Every time George refused, the priest threatened to send him back to Poland. It's been 20 years, but I'm still being treated by a psychologist, he says. Those episodes have always been heavy repercussions on my love life, he points out. The priest was denounced, but even in this case, he received only a transfer order. In Milan... Charlie. Quit licking that blanket. Stop it. In Milan, the story of Lucina brothers is quite famous, says Francesco Zanardi, president of the association, who survived clergy sexual abuse at Milano Today dossier. Both priests, both accused of sexual abuse. Don Alberto Lucina allegedly abused a little girl in the 1990s when he was a priest in Varese. He was sentenced 3 years ago by the Ecclesiastical Court of Lombardy to 5 years of exercise of the priesthood in a nursing home for the elderly, interrupting any activity with minors, continues Zanardi. Yet he was transferred from the parish of the Isola district, where he exercised, to the former seminary of Seveso only a few months later. Despite the measure, he had remained in contact with minors. For the brother, however, there was the filling of the trial for sexual assault against a disabled woman. The facts date back to 2016, but the complaint only came a few years later. Prosecutors called for the filing because there were no longer the time terms for proceeding. I think they mean the statute of limitations was up. It's a recurring problem, says Zanardi. The path of reworking by a victim is long and complex. It can trigger a removal of the trauma that erases for years this violence suffered. When the victims become aware and are ready to report it, it is too late. Moreover, a procedure that starts from a complaint made to the Italian judiciary compared to the canonical trial before the ecclesiastical court is very different. Both procedures and potential outcomes change. In the canonical process, the offense is to God and the victim is not even heard, Zanardi explains. In about 20 years, more than 1,000 incidents of sexual violence and pedophilia have emerged involving the clergy. In other countries of Europe, there are many fewer. Why are commissions of inquiry and discussion tables opened? In Italy, nothing is done. By the way, we do not know the extent of the submerged that supposedly inflate the numbers that we detect as an association, Zanardi says, saying they have no idea. They're citing this thousands of incidents, but they don't know how many there actually could be because there's no comprehensive tracking or resources or anything for people to take advantage of. In just over 2 decades, the association has recorded only 28 final convictions in Lombardy and over 100 covered-up episodes. There are no interventions by politics or by the judiciary, Zanardi continues. In Spain, a Catholic country as much as Italy, the Public Prosecutor's Office of the Republic has recently requested all data of sexual assaults against minors within religious institutions. The prosecutor's office arrived where the policy did not act, which was in fact forced to open a commission of inquiry. So the separation of church and state in Italy is even more non-existent than it is in Spain or here in the United States, which, based on the way that this was written, leads me to believe is a big part of the reason why we read about all these different cases of abuse, and they are citing figures in the thousands of victims, but there's nothing substantial that's been done, which is great. If you are Catholic, if you are involved in your parish, if you have children, please just be so careful about who you allow unfettered access, who you allow to have unfettered access to your children, who you allow into your home, who you trust with intimate details of your life. Priests are in such an interesting and unique position because they are supposed to be occupying the role of like intermediary between the layperson and the heavenly host, essentially. And so there is a tremendous amount of trust that is placed on these human men. Particularly, you introduce things like the sacrament of reconciliation, which literally requires that you go into a room with a closed door and tell another person all of your misdeeds, failings, and shortcomings, ostensibly so that you can receive the reconciliation and go forward as a Catholic who's, not in fear of suffering eternal torment in hell. But the power imbalance that exists in that situation is really significant. And it's significant among an adult, two adults, like an adult layperson and a priest, but between a child and an adult, the kids do not stand a chance. They cannot stand up for themselves. They're not capable of defending themselves successfully against this type of predation. The responsibility is on us adults to do that for them, to ask hard questions, to be willing to rock the boat, to be willing to potentially offend someone's sensibilities, to step outside the line of what is considered an acceptable or normal, like, way to interact with people in a clerical status. Just be careful is all I can say. Just be careful. Be careful who you trust. And this doesn't just go for priests. This goes for everybody, because the statistics show that abusers are hardly ever, rarely, a predator in a white paneled van with puppies and candy. It's somebody who's already in your home. The call is coming from within the house. In the Catholic Church's case, man, the phone is ringing off the fucking hook. So here's another one. Priest accused of sexual assault on 11-year-old woman. I think the translation messed that up. 11-year-old child in Trento is also a teacher. The alleged abuse at school. So this was September 18th. I don't know if this is the same priest from the previous article, because they didn't name him. They just called him Father A. But they mentioned the prosecutor of Trento. So let's read this. A 40-year-old priest allegedly took advantage of his role as a religion teacher at a school in Trento to abuse an 11-year-old pupil of his. The girl told her parents everything, and the investigation of the police started. Now, the public prosecutor's office of Trento has asked for the indictment for the man on charges of aggravated sexual assault on a minor. The protagonists of the story are an 11-year-old girl who attends the middle school of a religious education institution in Trento, and a 40-year-old priest, her religious teacher. The man, who has been meanwhile transferred to Rome, is accused of abuse and harassment against the 11-year-old. After the investigations conducted by the police, the public prosecutor's office of Trento asked for him to be brought to trial for aggravated sexual assault on a minor. This is reported by Adage. The investigation started after the alleged victim told her parents of the morbid attentions that her professor of religion, very active at school, also in organizing sporting and recreational events. According to the indictment, the parish priest allegedly molested the 11-year-old on several occasions, touching her and groping her in her private parts. The girl was heard in a protected hearing with the formula to the evidentiary incident, telling how much immediately. It is not ruled out that there may be other complaints against the priest, because the first time that a perpetrator is caught is not going to be the first time that they have done something like this. Ever. In fact, what emerged from some time in the corridors of the school, there was talk of the equivocal attitudes of the teacher, behaviors that have annoyed several other students. With the 11-year-old, according to the indictment, he would have gone further. The priest denies violence and the morbid approaches to his student. It's in interrogation in front of the PM. The man said he was an expansive person who tends to seek contact with others. Maybe you shouldn't. He denied that he has had a second end and did something to his pupils. The story of the girl was considered credible by the public prosecutor of Trento, who decided to send the priest to trial. The hearing before the judge was set early next year. So it will be some time before we hear any more follow-up from that. But how refreshing that, for a change, the victim was actually taken seriously, and the report that this child made was considered credible. I mean, that really should always be the case, because what you may not know, but what is absolutely true, you can Google this if you want to fact check me, is that false reporting from children only composes something like 2 to 4% of all reporting that children make of some type of abuse made against them by an adult. Only like 2 to 4% of the time is that child lying, which means that the overwhelming majority of the time when a child comes forward and says that something was done to them, they're telling the truth. And they need to be believed, because kids simply do not lie about that kind of thing. But how often have we seen testimonies from victims, children, women, men, it really doesn't matter, being just kind of like discounted and tossed to the side because it was inconvenient to a narrative or something. Happens all the time. All right, so we got another article about the weasel Cipriani. This was published on September 23rd. It says that the Vatican has warned Juan Luis Cipriani that he could face canonical proceedings for his sexual abuse allegations. This is Pedro Salinas, and Pedro Salinas is a journalist. He also wrote a book called Half Monks, Half Soldiers, which exposed the Peruvian SCV organization, which has largely been perceived as like an Opus Dei copycat, by the way. He wrote a book about this organization with another journalist, Paola Ugaz, and they exposed and blew the entire thing wide open because up until that point, this was 2015, neither the church nor Peruvian authorities nor Opus Dei nor anyone else seemed inclined to do anything about it. And he has continued to speak out in the press about what the Vatican has done, what Cipriani has been doing, what has been sort of the fallout since abuse allegations were brought forward. And Cipriani, as you may recall, was living in Lima or in Peru for a number. I mean, he's Peruvian, so that is the reason for the quote being attributed to Pedro Salinas. And Pedro Salinas, he himself was a victim of the SCV, of the SCV's founder, Fernando Fagari, and he has dedicated his life to speaking out and to shining a light on abuses, and my hat's off to him because I think that is incredible. So anyway, we'll read what this article has to say about Cipriani. Salinas has stated that the Holy See has warned the cardinal about a possible canonical process that could lead to his expulsion from the clerical state. So yeah, co-author Half Monks, Half Soldiers, Salinas said Monday that the Vatican has warned Cipriani, sanctioned by Pope Francis for an accusation of sexual abuse, of the possibility of facing a canonical process that could culminate in his expulsion. On the latest edition of his podcast, Después de Todo, which is broadcast on the La Mula website, Salinas recalled that the case of pedophilia linked to Cipriani was made public by a report in the Spanish newspaper El País after the mayor of Lima, Rafael López Aliaga, awarded him an award. Of course, Pope Leo is aware of this accusation and is keeping an eye on it. This is in quotes. He's so worried about it that Cipriani has already been warned not to make it again, because if he does, a canonical process will be opened. And if a canonical process is opened, Peru's first historical cardinal could suddenly become, at any moment, the first priest or cardinal of Opus Dei reduced to the lay state, he said. So that would be significant. Cipriani, Archbishop Emeritus of Lima and the first cardinal of Opus Dei, received sanctions that include exile from Peru, a ban on wearing cardinal symbols, and a ban on making public statements, the Holy See press office reported at the time. However, he reappeared in Lima on January 7th when the mayor of Lima awarded him the Order of Merit Medal and the Grand Cross rank for his tireless pastoral, academic, and ecclesiastical work. The Vatican clarified that the measures were imposed after his retirement as head of the Peruvian Church in 2019, quote, as a result of the accusations against him, and that the cardinal himself accepted them. The Peruvian Episcopal Conference, CEP, also confirmed the sanctions and stated that the Holy Father has treated the cardinal with exquisite pastoral charity and has proceeded in a spirit of justice and mercy. How about some justice and mercy for the victims? Is that possible? Could we get a fast track on that, maybe? The complaint against Cipriani reached Rome in 2018 when the victim requested that her case be kept confidential, for which she had the support of Salinas and other journalists dedicated to investigating clerical abuse. In that process, Chilean Juan Carlos Cruz, a survivor of the Caradima case, helped ensure that the complainant's letter was received by Francisco, who then arranged for the formation of an investigative commission that corroborated the accusation, according to journalist Paola Ugaz, who spoke to Infobae in February of this year. In that same podcast, Salinas addressed the failed meeting between the mayor and Leo, emphasizing that the cancellation was neither accidental nor the result of an alleged conspiracy, but rather a direct decision by the pontiff. He stated that the Pope has direct knowledge of the situation in Peru, especially regarding figures linked to the now defunct Sodalicio de Vida Cristiana, SCV organization, a case in which he became involved since 2018. He himself, Leo, was the victim of a miserable and petty smear campaign accusing him of a supposed cover-up, which was absolutely false. He knows perfectly well about the moves the Sodalicio has made with Lopez Aliaga to shield properties and at least the 9 cemeteries it owns through a foundation created by the mayor to avoid compensating the victims. He knows that much, Salinas concluded. So this whole situation with the SCV and Cipriani and Aliaga and the Vatican is really, really interesting. I have like a quarter of my deep dive episode that I have been putting together about this situation. I have like just a quarter of it left that I need to edit and get through. Hopefully I'll be working on that later after I get off of this live stream. And then it'll be ready to present with you guys. And I dug into quite a bit of this stuff, but there is going to be a part 2 to that research as well, because this situation is actually quite significant. It's not just some defunct, weird little religious group in Peru that Pope Francis suppressed because it got out of hand. There's quite a bit more to the story because of the fact that this organization, during its reign from like the 1970s to just earlier this year, accrued quite a bit of financial largesse. They own properties, cemeteries. That's kind of, I discussed this yesterday, that's how organizations will keep their assets contained, basically, is to have them in non-liquid form, real estate, and that kind of thing. And the whole real estate side of it all is really, really interesting. I've been learning about something called land trafficking, which there's a long history of land trafficking in Latin America. And this whole situation, the SCV was suppressed in April, is done away with, technically no longer exists, but their properties and their wealth and everything is still very much real. And the Vatican or whatever authority ends up coming to take this whole thing to task is going to have to figure out a way to wade through all of that stuff, and who knows what kind of a process that will be. I'm sure that this is just pure speculation on my part. I'm not like a financial journalist or anything like that, but it would not surprise me to learn that there are some irregularities, gaps in their bookkeeping, and things that just don't quite exactly line up. Maybe there's some cleaning going on of some funds, if you know what I mean. So this is a very complex situation that goes beyond just an abusive organization that was suppressed or demoted by the Vatican. There is more to it, and I'm looking forward to sharing all that information with you guys, just because I think it adds more nuance and context to this world that we are all moving in, and I think you'll learn some new stuff. So anyway, pretty interesting article. This whole thing with Cipriani is dragging out far longer than I ever thought that it would, and I have to imagine that it's just because Pope Francis passed away like kind of in the middle of everything and left some things sort of undone, and they're rather large things. We're talking about Opus Dei statutes, we're talking about this case with Cipriani, to say nothing of the wealth of other shit that is hitting the fan, religiously speaking, in the Catholic Church right now. So I don't know, we'll see. This is another article from opusdei.org. This is like the second or third article that I'm reading from their site. So people can no longer accuse me of not reading or listening to what Opus Dei has to say. Believe me, I do. And I have some thoughts, particularly about this article right here. So let me just show you the original. So this is a French article that was published on opusdei.org on their French site. See there in the address thing, it says FR, France. And the title of this article, when you translate it, behind every file is a person. Now, this is a really interesting article to me for reasons that I'm about to get into. And it's interesting to me because of where they published it and what they're discussing. It says, on the occasion of the Jubilee of those who dispense justice, an administrative judge testifies to the way in which his faith illuminates his mission, to ensure the legality of public action, to seek legal truth with prudence and strength, and to consider each person with dignity and charity. They ask, what does your job consist of? And he says that he's a magistrate in the administrative courts, which are the tribunals and courts of appeal which judge disputes between individuals and administrations, whether the state, local authorities, or public establishments. A legal order whose highest court is the Council of State, parallel to the judicial and criminal courts, which ultimately report to the court of causation. My role is to ensure the legality of public action, to ensure that people who feel harmed by the action of an administration or a public body can find redress. And then they get into, how does your faith inform the way you administer justice? And he says it allows us to participate in the work of God. So, very Opus Dei coded in the construction of a just and balanced society, in the resolution of the conflicts, and in the creation of peace. This is just, it's Opus Dei lingo through and through. How can the meticulous work of studying files become prayer and an offering to God? That's where they talk about turning your daily life into a vocation and following your vocation and blah, blah, blah. It says what virtues are particularly necessary, whatever. You can go and read this if you really want to in your whole time. That's not really the point. The reason why this stood out to me was because it was published on a French site. And to date, the only country in the world in which Opus Dei has been successfully held accountable, taken to court, and convicted of any type of misstep in regard to how they treat their domestic staff was in France. Catherine V. Tissier. I've talked about it many times in the past. I have a video all about it if you want to go and watch it and learn more about it. There are posts on Opus Dei Exposed discussing this case, and this case is significant because for a few different reasons, but I'll tell you the background of it first. Basically, there was a young French woman named Catherine Tissier who ended up going to this Daznan school in France, and it was a catering school, culinary arts school, some type of something where she was supposed to be getting educated. And she went to this school, and of course the inevitable ended up happening. She really just worked a whole lot, including like working in people's homes, like being people's nannies and cleaning their like homes and stuff for them outside of this school or whatever where she was supposed to be working. And of course she was never compensated for her work. She and 99 other domestic workers were never compensated, and I can say that and I can say that that is a fact without any fear of retaliation from Opus Dei, because the French court convicted Opus Dei of a host of labor violations, and in Catherine's case there was also an element of like medical abuse as well, because she had been placed on substances like tranquilizers and things while she was in Opus Dei, because she started exhibiting all of these like health issues and stuff, which is not uncommon in Opus Dei at all, not uncommon, which is another reason why I think like the whole doctor element is really interesting. But you put a person in a really stressful environment where they're not getting adequate rest, they're not getting the time to like care for themselves and decompress, and their work that they're providing is not being valued. That can start to manifest within the human body as like physical ailments and problems. And so Opus Dei's solution in this case was to just give her a whole bunch of drugs, basically. And she got to a point where her condition was so severe that after her family got her out of the school, which was a task in and of itself, again, you can go and watch my video about it, but after they got her out, she was required to be on a drug withdrawal regime to wean her off of the substances, the psychoactive drugs or whatever that she had been placed on. She was at such high doses, had become so dependent, and was like so strung out that they couldn't just have her stop taking them. There was like an entire process that she had to go through to recover from this entire thing. So beginning in like 2001, the initial court case was brought forward. She brought it forward against Opus Dei and against the school and some of the individuals who were like in her chain of command or whatever. And it ended up dragging out for 11 years. And in 2011, initially, Opus Dei was I don't know what the word is. They basically found no fault in Opus Dei's actions and behavior, and cleared Opus Dei or whatever. And Opus Dei made sure to publicize those articles discussing that fact. You can still, if you go and look for them, may be able to find one or two still floating around on the World Wide Web. But what they failed to mention is that immediately following that, Catherine turned right around and like, whatever the legal term is, I'm not a lawyer, but she brought the case forward again, basically. And on that second go around, the court ended up siding with Catherine and the other 99 domestic workers, and convicted Opus Dei and also the school and some of the people who are working there. And Opus Dei, the organization, had to pay fines, as well as these individuals and the school had to pay fines. And the reason why this is so significant is because in the history of Opus Dei, it has been very, very difficult to bring any type of substantive legal action against the organization, because they have been very, very smart, creative in how they have set everything up. You know, they hide all of their efforts and their activism behind these so-called corporate works that are ostensibly run by people who happen to be affiliated with Opus Dei, but Opus Dei is not really interested in what they're doing. That's an independent thing that they're doing. You know, it's all of this sort of like sleight of hand and everything. And it has been very, very difficult to bring any type of litigation against the organization itself for that reason, except in France. In 2016, they succeeded and Opus Dei was fined. And so isn't it interesting that Opus Dei decided to publish this article, which is coming at a time when there is a long and ongoing case being built against Opus Dei in Argentina, brought by 43 former domestic workers in that country, and that has been ongoing now for a number of years. Argentinian federal authorities have now gotten involved. And isn't it interesting that this article was published while this stuff is happening in the background, and the statutes are sitting on ice? Apparently nothing is happening there. And they just had to publish this article on the French Opus Dei site. Specifically on the French Opus Dei site, they decide to talk about respecting the fact that there's a person behind every file. Maybe I am reading into this way too much. Maybe I need to go outside and touch grass. Maybe I've been doing this for a little bit too long. But to me, this does not seem accidental. It's interesting to me because, again, this organization has really done everything it can to maintain the image of like a fault-free organization who's never done anything wrong and blah blah blah. Maybe some things happened somewhere and we're very sad about that, but nothing's actually serious has ever gone on. But that's a misrepresentation of the facts, and France is where the truth actually comes from. So anyway, I think this is really interesting. I don't know what their angle is here. I don't really know what the goal of this is, but I think it's interesting. So I wanted to mention that. And if you don't know anything about, if you're not familiar with Tissier via Opus Dei, please do go and look on Opus Dei Exposed, or look through my library of content, and you can find some information about it. And I definitely think more people should know about it because it's a really, really big deal. All right, so we got some articles here. This is from bishopaccountability.org. And then we got two of them. So this is from July 8th, and then this one here is from July 4th. But the reason why I had them pulled up, did I lose my article? I had another article that was talking about this guy, and it was more recent. Let me see if I can find it. I can't. So this Bishop Umbers, which this happened in Australia, and I started seeing stuff about it back in July. He stepped aside after an abuse claim was brought forward. And there was a whole lot of back and forth about how the police in the country had not been notified. People were saying that they had been notified. Yeah, they said that the church hadn't reported the abuse claims. But then just recently, and I don't know why I don't have it in here, apparently that entire situation kind of like got cleared up. And now this Umbers person is back in their position because apparently they decided that the accusations were baseless. Let me look really quick and see if I can find, I don't know what happened to the article that I had that was more recent. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. September 24th. So let me scan through these first earlier articles so we can refresh our memory on what had been happening. Get back to it. Here we go. So July 4th, we found out via the Pillar, and then bishopaccountability.org picked this up, that Bishop Umbers had stepped aside while emphatically denying the allegation. The Archdiocese of Sydney said that on July 1st it had received notice of a civil claim of historical abuse, with Auxiliary Bishop Richard Umber identified as the claim's subject. He's a member of Opus Dei, who was appointed as a Sydney Auxiliary Bishop in 2016, and is known throughout the English-speaking world for his online presence, which has earned the 54-year-old nickname the Meme Bishop. I guess. I've never heard of him. He's an Auckland, New Zealand native, born in 1971. He trained for the priesthood at Opus Dei Seminary in Rome, studied at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross, which is Opus Dei's university in Rome, I believe it's in Rome. He was ordained a priest in 2002 at Spain's Torre Ciudad Shrine, which we read about yesterday as Opus Dei's shrine. So this guy's Opus Dei through and through, right? And following his Episcopal ordination in 2016, he represented Australia and New Zealand's bishops at the International Eucharistic Congresses in Budapest, and he was granted Australian citizenship in April 2024. And let's see. So he stepped aside. We're talking about another guy here, this Brungart, who also did something similar. Even though you don't technically have to, because you're presumed innocent until proven guilty, but in a high-profile thing like that, it's often not very desirable to keep that person in that position when everybody's fingering them for abuses. Let's see, I'm looking for where it kind of gets back to Umbers in here. So he stepped aside. It says that if the body concludes there's a reasonable likelihood that the applicant is eligible for redress, it can offer the applicant counseling, direct response from an institution such as a church or school, and a payment. So they have like a redress scheme, basically. And they mention retired Bishop Christopher Saunders, who led the Diocese of Broome in Western Australia from 1995 to 2021 and is currently facing sexual abuse and assault charges. And he pleaded not guilty in September 2024 to 19 abuse charges. Good God. And then Cardinal George Pell, the former Archbishop of Sydney, was convicted in 2018 of sex abuse, but then the conviction was overturned in 2020 by the High Court of Australia after he spent nearly 2 years in prison, and then he died in 2023. Okay, so then this next article, this is from a few days later, July 8th. It says, this was reported originally in the Klaxon, which is a Sydney, New South Wales, Australian publication, that the church hadn't reported the abuse claims to the New South Wales police. It says that the Catholic Church's powerful Sydney Archdiocese has failed to report to New South Wales police allegations of abuse involving one of its most senior figures, despite disclosing the matter a week ago. The New South Wales police said they have not received any notification from the church about the abuse allegations involving Auxiliary Bishop Richard Umbers, who is second only to Sydney Archbishop Anthony Fisher. let's see. It says also, despite having claimed that the New South Wales police have confirmed there is no investigation at the time, so they couldn't have been informed because there was no investigation. Let's see. The Sydney Archdiocese has repeatedly refused to respond to requests for comments from the klaxon and did not respond to a series of written questions yesterday. They received, and then Bishop Umbers, they have this from 1 July. The Archdiocese of Sydney has received a notice of civil claim of historical abuse. In accordance with the obligation, Archdiocese has notified the relevant authorities of the complaint. The New South Wales police have confirmed there is no active investigation at this time. So the New South Wales police are saying they didn't know and don't have a case. And the Archdiocese is saying they do know, but they don't have a case. So it's like a bunch of backwards and forwards, he said, she said. Yesterday, New South Wales police said its position remains the same and we have not received any notifications. So some wires were getting crossed somewhere really, really badly. And then, of course, Bishop Umbers emphatically denies the allegation. He is reportedly the first Opus Dei member to have become bishop in Australian history, so he's kind of significant. Umbers is significant for Opus Dei in the same sense that Cipriani is significant, because Cipriani was a first cardinal, and then Opus Dei can say that Umbers is the first bishop in Australian history, who's also in Opus Dei. So yeah. Oh, look, and look at this. It says the St. Paul of the Cross Catholic Primary School in Sydney's inner west names Umbers as its bishop in residence. A priest of the Opus Dei, Umbers has worked in multiple church positions in Sydney since 2003. He was chaplain of Warren College, Creston College, Kenvale College, Nirana Study Center, and Redfield College, all in Sydney. And those are infamous names. If you want to learn more about Nirana and Redfield College, then I highly recommend the ABC's Four Corners documentary from 2023, I believe, is when it came out, talking about these PARED schools. The PARED is this organization that was created by parents at one point back in like the 70s or something like that, that launched these schools, these private Opus Dei schools, and they've remained Opus Dei to present day, and got some very unfavorable press a few years ago, and now have once again been brought up in Tim Pocock's The Truth Will Set You Free book, which came out earlier this summer. And he went to Redfield College and came from an Opus Dei family. So, okay. So anyway, that's the background on this Umbers guy. So now jumping to present day on this article real quick. This was published September 24th of this year. This is from The Pillar. Umbers returns to ministry, abuse claim not sustained. Information given by the complainant was inconsistent with other evidence obtained. An Australian auxiliary bishop returned to public ministry Wednesday after an investigation concluded that an abuse allegation against him was not sustained. Bishop Richard Umbers of the Sydney Archdiocese had withdrawn from public ministry in early July as an independent third-party investigation began into a civil claim of past abuse. Umbers denied the allegation emphatically. The email obtained by The Pillar informed archdiocesan employees September 24th that an independent investigation has now concluded and returned to finding that the allegation made was not sustained. And so he will now return to public office and public ministry. Mentions again that he's been a member of Opus Dei, that he was from New Zealand, studied at Opus Dei, ordained by Opus Dei, granted Australian citizenship in 2024, and he was accused of abuse in early July, and the Sydney Archdiocese said that in conformity with the Archdiocese protocol for managing safeguarding complaints and relevant legislation, Umbers had agreed to stand aside from public ministry while this allegation is investigated. An abuse crisis has overshadowed the Catholic Church in Australia for decades, gaining public visibility in the 1990s. The Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse, which operated from 2013 to 2017, scrutinized the handling of abuse cases by the Catholic Church in Australia, offering detailed recommendations to the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference. The Commission's other recommendations included the creation of a single national redress scheme that was established in 2018. Blah, blah, blah. And then again, they mentioned these two other individuals who had been accused of similar things, Pell and this Bishop Christopher Saunders Fellow. So I wanted to bring that up because I had mentioned that in past episodes, the fact that this was kind of going on in Australia with this Umbers guy, and I wanted to present the fact that it apparently, for all intents and purposes, has reached a conclusion, and he's been exonerated. So it's a little after 11 now. How long is this article? It's pretty lengthy. I think I've been going for a little over 2 hours now. I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here just because it's getting a little long in the tooth. My throat's starting to hurt a little bit. So that's my sign that it's time to wrap this up. But let me see. Still have a number of articles to get through, about 10, I would say. So maybe I'll go live again tomorrow, or Thursday. Kind of depends on what my schedule ends up looking like. And I'm just going to continue to make my way through these headlines until we get through all of them, just because there are some really, really good headlines from the last month that I think deserve to be discussed. I think they deserve some attention placed on them, and I don't want to just kind of like cast those to the side in haste or anything like that. So this is where I'm going to conclude it for today. I think tomorrow we'll pick back up, tomorrow or Thursday, we'll pick back up with this article, Opus Dei in Spain, influential and controversial. Thank you so much for everybody for tuning in for today. This has been great. I really, really appreciate it. Appreciate hearing your guys' thoughts as always. And hopefully I will see you here again for the next live stream, either tomorrow or Thursday, like I said. But in the meantime, that's where I'm going to leave it for now. If you want to connect with me outside of YouTube, all my social media and everything are linked down below. You can also send me an email, and my DMs are open. If you or someone that you know is in need of mental health support, I have linked some resources down in the description of this live stream. So please give those a look through if you do need help. Life is very challenging, but there are tools and resources that we can utilize to help us, and we don't have to go through things alone. So if you do need help, please reach out. With all of that said, that's where I'm going to conclude it for now. Thank you so much, and as always, remember, nolite te bastardes carborundorum. Don't let the bastards drag you down.